Hello aspirants, welcome to PW OnlyIAS English channel. I am here Harpreet Singh again with the analysis of The Hindu from 14 September 2024. Let's begin the analysis. The articles taken for today's discussion are Right to Silence, Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, SEBI, the editorial regarding infrastructural crumbling, we have the transgender study, and we have certain prelims MCQs for you for your practice. Now let's begin with the analysis. The first article in today's newspaper mentions something about right to be silent. Now this is a very important article with respect to your GS paper 2, because in your mains examination they can ask you, what do you mean by the right to be silent? How it is applicable with respect to various arrests. It can also be asked in your preliminary examination. So let's understand something about it and the various provisions that are mentioned in the Constitution of India and what is the court's view or the judgment regarding that. Now please understand, the Supreme Court's observation on the right to silence. The Supreme Court has observed a lot of things and given its various views with respect to right to silence. First is, the view what Supreme Court mentions is the Constitution grants the right to remain silent. Now, the Constitution itself says that it is the right of the individual to remain silent. The Constitution gives the right against self-incrimination. What is the meaning of self-incrimination? It basically means that no one can be forced to be a witness against himself. For example, it was earlier perceived that, for example, a person is arrested, the forces might force them to say something that might be against that particular person who is accused. Now, you cannot force a person to be a witness against himself. So that is why this rights come into being. The Constitution grants the right to remain silent. One aspect of it. The second aspect, the Supreme Court opines that cooperation does not mean confession. If a particular individual is cooperating with the police forces or the agencies concerned, it does not mean that that particular person is confessing of certain crime that has been committed. So what the Supreme Court says, cooperation does not mean admission of a guilt. Next, remaining silent does not mean non-cooperation. It is very often perceived that if a person is remaining silent, the forces might say, the police forces for that matter, that the particular individual is not cooperating with them. But the Supreme Court opines that remaining silent does not mean non-cooperation. Individuals have the right to choose not to speak. It is their fundamental right to choose not to speak. Then what does the Supreme Court opines? Supreme Court says refusing confession does not limit freedom. It is a very, very important aspect that you need to analyze and understand. Refusing confession doesn't mean limiting the freedom. What does it mean? An accused person cannot be deprived of their freedom solely because they have not admitted to the alleged crimes. What does this mean? For example, if the person chooses to remain silent, you cannot deprive that particular person of the various freedom or the fundamental rights because that person chose not to speak. Now, this is a very, very important view or the clarification that the Honorable Supreme Court has mentioned. And one should please understand, because this can be asked in your mains examination and obviously in your preliminary examinations also. So let's move ahead. Now, what are the constitutional provisions that we are basically dealing with? Now, the Article 20, why it is important is, among the various other aspects that we study, it also mentions that the person has a right that against the self-incrimination. Yes. So that a person cannot be forced to be a witness against himself. It is a part of Article 20 of the Indian Constitution. And that is why the Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court, has basically interpreted the right to silence with the respect to Article 20, that is no self-incrimination. Now let's move ahead. Even Article 20, subsection B, what does it say? It states that no person accused of any offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself, which is applicable to the criminal proceedings. Now again, both these things, an outcome would be you cannot force a person to speak. He has a choice to remain silent. Now, this is very important with respect to GS2 paper. There are certain other Supreme Court judgments also that have basically emphasized on the aspect of no self-incrimination, and obviously with respect to choosing not to speak. Now, these few judgments that I've mentioned, why I've mentioned them is, please remember, these can be used while writing the answers. Now, the three important judgments: the State of Bombay versus Kathy Kalu Augad, 1961, Ritesh Sinha versus State of Uttar Pradesh, 2019, Selvi versus the State of Karnataka, 2010. Now, these three judgments, in these judgments also, the Honorable Supreme Court has reiterated the same thing. So, this is something that you should be aware of when the article was mentioned in the newspaper. And let's move ahead. There's a particular scheme that was mentioned in the newspaper. Now, whenever we talk about schemes, please remember they become very, very important with respect to General Studies Paper 2 also, GS3 also, obviously with respect to food processing and agriculture industries that we have seen. So, whenever a scheme that comes in the newspaper and it is being repeatedly comes in various articles, it becomes very important for your preliminary and the mains examination. So, this scheme was mentioned. So, let us see few provisions and few aspects of this particular scheme. Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. Now, this scheme was launched in 2020 by the Department of Fisheries. The reason behind it was to bring about ecologically healthy, economically viable, and socially inclusive development of the fisheries sector. So, holistic development of the fisheries sector is expected by the implementation of this scheme, which is Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. Now, let us go on to the various other aspects of this particular scheme. What are the objectives? What is this particular scheme aiming at? First, harness the potential in a sustainable, responsible, and an equitable manner. Potential of what? The fisheries sector. It wants to harness the fisheries sector in a sustainable, responsible, and an equitable manner. Second, enhance the fish production and productivity. These two need to be enhanced, keeping in mind the sustainability, equitable nature, and the responsibility that we have with respect to the environment also. Next, modernize and strengthen the value chain, including the post-harvest management and quality improvement. Obviously, it is very, very important because post-harvest management, if managed well, it reduces a lot of waste. Obviously, it is a quality concern also. So, it is very, very important the post-harvest waste is properly managed. So, now this scheme basically helps give value addition with respect to these three objectives and aims that are presented here. Now, let's move ahead. What are the other details? Please remember, this is a very interesting scheme. Now, this scheme has certain parts which are concerned with the central sector scheme and some parts centrally sponsored. Please understand, in the examination, the question can come, this scheme is a central sector scheme completely, or it can be written in a prelim statement that it is a centrally sponsored scheme completely. Now, you should be knowing that there are certain components that are sent under the central sector scheme. That means those components are funded completely by the central government. While the other components are centrally sponsored, that means the center and the state both are contributing with respect to the finances. This should be kept in mind. This is a very interesting point and an important point with respect to this particular scheme. Now, then outlay is of 20,050 crore. And this scheme is being implemented from 2020-21 to 2024-25, that is for 5 years, which is aiming at a holistic, sustainable, and equitable development of the fisheries sector. Now, this is very important. Remember that every statement mentioned here or any statement mentioned here can be picked up and put in your preliminary examination. Obviously, it becomes important when you are giving your mains examination also, where a question, let us say, with respect to agriculture comes, you can use this in the allied sector, or if the question on a fishery sector comes, you can definitely use what are the government initiatives where this particular scheme can be mentioned. So let's move ahead. Now see, there's an article that was mentioned with respect to certain allegations being made on the SEBI head. Now, for us, from the aspect of paper 4, we can use the concept of conflict of interest that can be picked up. But when you're preparing preparing this article, what you can learn, you need to know what basically SEBI is. What are the various provisions that are there? And if there is certain conflict of interest, that means there is going to be certain issues with the body also. From the means perspective also, for us, that is more important. Not a particular individual over here is important for us, but what we learn from this particular article becomes very, very important. Because if certain body comes in the limelight, that particular body can be picked up as a question by the Union Public Service Commission and placed in your prelims or mains examination. So for us, it is important to study a little bit about SEBI. Now, what is SEBI? SEBI is Securities and Exchange Board of India, right? Now, it is a statutory body. That means it has an outcome of an act being passed, right? Now, SEBI is a statutory body established on April 12, 1992 under the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act 1992. Now, this is a act or the law which basically establishes or gives a statutory status to Securities and Exchange Board of India. First thing that you should know. Next, as we move forward, we will see what is the structure of SEBI. Now, the head of SEBI is the chairman. There are two other members that are the officers from the Union Finance Ministry, right? One is the chairman who is appointed by the Government of India. Next is two members who are the officers from the Union Finance Ministry. Then you have one member who is from the Reserve Bank of India. Then there are 5 members which are again nominated by the Government of India. Out of these 5 members, at least 3 are whole-time members, the others are part-time members. Whole-time are completely associated for that particular period for what they have been appointed. Otherwise, others are part-time depending upon the requirement. So this is what is basically the composition. Now, SEBI also has Securities Appellate Tribunal. This is basically in case of certain order that is passed by SEBI and you do not agree or you have certain grievances with the order of SEBI, you can appeal to the tribunal to resolve your grievances. So this is also a part of when we talk about the act that is passed in 1992, where Securities Appellate Tribunal has a presiding officer, 2 other members, and it has same powers as a civil court. Now, this is something that you should know. Now, when we're talking about the controversy that are associated, that is with respect to the head, the chairman of the SEBI. Let us move ahead. What are the powers and function? Now, this body is a quasi-legislative and a quasi-judicial body. It functions to fulfill the requirements of 3 categories of people. Issuers, that is it by providing a marketplace in which the issuer can increase the finance. Next is investor by ensuring the safety and supply of precise and accurate information because it is a regulator. So it is its duty that all the stakeholders which are concerned or are concerned in the market, the interest of all those stakeholders should be preserved. So that is what SEBI is aiming at with respect to issuer, with respect to investor, and the various intermediaries, right? Intermediaries or brokers, we can say, by enabling a competitive professional marketplace for the intermediaries. That means various brokers and sub-brokers that are there, their interest, the people who are, let us say, involved in buying stocks, shares, selling them, along with the other stakeholders that are there in the market, their interest should be preserved and a level playing field needs to be created. So it is a market regulator. So that is why it is his important duties. The interest of all the people concerned with the market are preserved and secured. When we move ahead, we see by the Securities Law Amendment Act 2014, we see SEBI has now able to regulate any money pooling scheme greater than 100 crores. Basically, this means that certain other powers have been enhanced, which is done by the Government of India through the act that is passed in the Parliament. Along with it, please remember, SEBI performs the functions of registration and regulation of working of the various venture capital funds. It also works for promoting and regulating the self-regulation, educate the investors, registration of brokers and sub-brokers. So overall, every aspect of the market that is concerned, it is a market regulator and everything comes under its jurisdiction. So it plays a very, very, very important role. That is why if there is certain issue with respect to any particular person holding a position in SEBI, it is a quite concerning problem. So one should also deal with the problems also that the SEBI is facing. Now let's see. Issues. Appointment procedure. You would have seen that whether the chairman is being appointed, it is being appointed or nominated by the government. It has certain people, let us say the members from the Union Finance Ministry. It has one member from the SEBI. It has then 5 members, out of which 3 which are nominated by the government, but 3 are permanent. Now, do you realize that it is a market regulator? Important is that it should be of completely autonomous nature and a body which should be completely independent. What happens is that appointment procedure itself is a problematic issue, where what is expected is that a separate autonomous body might or should appoint the people who are leading the SEBI. But this is not the case over here. Next issue is influence of the finance ministry. Now you realize that 2 members who are permanent, the officers are basically in the SEBI itself. See here. 2 members who are the officers from the Union Finance Ministry are a part of it. Now, it is quite possible that the Finance Ministry has an influence on the SEBI. Now, the regulator should be independent if it needs to work properly. That is why influence of the Finance Ministry in SEBI can be seen as from a negative aspect, because the regulators need to work independent of the government itself in various issues that are concerned. Excessive power and negative impact of the economy. It has been seen that sometimes when SEBI is passing orders, one order passed by SEBI tends to impact the large sector of the economy incompletely, and which leads to a negative impact on the economy. Next is tackling insider trading. Now, what is insider trading? For example, I'll give you a case study. A person is working as a director or a very important position in a company. Now, he reveals certain data or information with respect to, let us say, the company is being listed in the stock exchange. Now, any decision being made in the company will definitely impact the rate of the shares. And if that insider information is revealed to the other people who might benefit from that, that is known as insider trading. Now, what this problem creates is that it creates a non-competitive field, a non-competitive marketplace where certain people have more information which give them an advantage over the others. So, in spite of doing or taking some action in controlling insider trading, we see those actions have been, in a way we can say, not very effective. And that is why it raises a lot of fingers on the functioning of SEBI right now. So, if these issues are resolved, you will be seeing that the multiple issues which are prevailing right now will also in a way get resolved. Clear? So let's move ahead with the further topic. This is a very important aspect that has been mentioned in the editorial with respect to shock of crumbling infrastructure and the solution. The person who has written this article has been the secretary to the Government of India. So he's one person who basically knows how the things are functioning. What I have done is, we will basically see what this introductory passage is or paragraph is, and later on see over here the challenges, traditional method practices, and what should be done. Agency setting. So we see an introduction, and then all we see over here are the various challenges and problems that are being faced in the infrastructure sector. And I have added some more points to prove them through various facts and reports of the Government of India. And then what this person is basically saying. So let's analyze them. In the introductory passage, he basically brings or highlights the problem that various bridges in Bihar are collapsing. Now, this collapse of so many bridges among, let us say, within a few days, creates a lot of issue why this is happening. So, the author basically says there is a issue of quality and project implementation. Now, how the project is being implemented, what is the quality of material being used, what are the various concerns, why it is not being audited properly, all these things are a major concern. While introducing them, what the author basically tries to say is the infrastructure is the core of the Indian economy. Please remember why he introduces it with the Bihar case study, because see, if a bridge is linking, let us say, two important places, if it collapses, you are basically delinking those places. The people will not be able to move. Important goods will not be able to move. Economy will be suffering badly. Communication will be suffering badly. Movement will be suffering. So you basically put the whole system in a halt. That is why he says infrastructure is the most important element, if not most, a very important element of the economy. Where he tries to say, see, infrastructure is a core of the economy. Now, see, infrastructure not only includes these, obviously the other things, but you see, rural and urban infrastructure, the transport, whether it is road, rail, air, all the airports concerning them, waterways, shipping, the ports, energy, logistics, social infrastructure, the buildings and other aspects related to, let us say, education, healthcare, all these things form a core of the Indian economy. Now, this is mentioned in the introductory passage. As we move ahead over here, we see the challenges being there. Now, please understand, I'll give you a few statistics. Though the thinker mentions this particular line, I am giving you these two extra things because it will help you and realize how important infrastructure is. The Economic Survey 2018 basically says that India will need about 4.5 trillion in the next 25 years for infrastructure development. In order to match the pace in which the population is going and the demand is going, India will need at least $4.5 trillion. So you realize the importance of infrastructure. Next, in the Economic Survey 2022 says that to achieve a 5 trillion economy, which is the aim of India, by 24-25, there is a need to spend $1.4 trillion on infrastructure alone if you want to achieve the status of a $5 trillion. What the author basically says is that India is aiming to get the status of a developed country by 2047. For that, infrastructure, by seeing all these, you can realize is the core. If these things will suffer, as we see the case of Bihar where bridges are falling, it is going to have a multiplier effect on the other sectors also. We can see the problems that India will face. That is why he says that we need to change the things, and he highlights the various problems. Now see, as we move ahead, we see that because we see it is so important, the infrastructure is so important, the government basically in the 24 budget has increased the capital expenditure allocation to 11.11 lakh crore, 3.4% of the GDP for infrastructure development. Now, government very categorically knows that if the infrastructure is not being developed, the aim to make India a developed country by 2047 will be a difficult or a mammoth task. That is why, yes, the allocation, a good allocation increase has been made with respect to the infrastructure development. Now, let's move ahead. The problems. Now, there are certain problems that are being mentioned by the author over here, who has been a former secretary. He says that time delays and cost overruns are a major concern. For example, when you prepare a document regarding the project, you basically tell what are the things going to be done, what is the cost, how much time it will take. So the moment there is delay in the implementation, the cost starts to increasing because the cost of items are already increasing. Now the projection of the cost was based on the fact that the project would be completed within, let us say, 5 or 6 years. The moment it takes 10 years, 11 years, you will see the cost will almost double. So that means your project planning has a lot of problems. That is why he says first is the delays and cost overrun. He gives an example. 431 infrastructural projects. This was a report, government report of 2023, where he says that 431 infrastructural projects were delayed, and because of that, a cost overrun of 4.82 lakh crores took place. Just imagine, this is not a small number. 4.82 lakh crore overrun. That means more than what was expected. Next is the issue that basically the editor mentioned in the editorial is multiple clearances. In spite of the fact that we see that single window clearance, we still see that there are multiple levels of permission that are required, which basically lead to the cost overrun, delays, and also corruption. Next is lack of time devoted during the project planning stage. This is the very important aspect. What we do is, the most important thing is, if you are implementing a project, majority of the time initially, before it is actually implemented, should be how things are going to be done, and they should be very systematically and meticulously listed. And in case there is a delay, what would be the projections and how the resources would be garnered so that the project is implemented is what is required, which we basically lack. So that is why the thinker or the author over here mentions that the project implementation stage or the project management in India is a major concern. So he moves ahead and says, move away from the traditional project management. What is going on? We still use a traditional means of project management. We need to move away from them, use softwares, use artificial intelligence, use real-time information gathering, use data analysis, use metadata analysis, so that you project in case of delays also, what are the things one has to do. Proper auditing mechanisms are also required if you want to move away, because our focus in the traditional project management is more on implementation. See, the traditional project management is more on implementation, where audit takes the back seat. Auditing whether what is being done, to what level it is being done, to repeatedly check whether the quality is there. Audit is what is lacking over here. That is why he says we need to set up an agency which basically monitors all these things. We need to set up proper project management agencies when we are dealing with the infrastructural projects, so that there is a comprehensive holistic planning, repeated analysis, real-time data analysis, proper auditing of every phase, so that when the product or the project that is implemented is of a quality status, because that is the need of the hour for India right now. This is what the editorial was. And let's move ahead. Now, this topic being mentioned over here, again mentioned in the editorial, please remember that why I've taken this is, though this mentions a lot about transgenders, even the homosexuality and all, out of this I have selected the topic of transgender and dealt with this in the further slides. But giving you a brief about that, see, the author over here mentions that the victimization of the third gender has taken place. Now, it is more than the victimization, it is a issue of the human right crisis that is taking place. Now, she's basically mentioned that the other genders are segregated from the mainstream society. They're treated or given a status of like untouchables. People want to stay away from them. So, this is basically a major human rights issue what she's trying to point. Then she also mentions the issues and problems of homosexuality over here. And she says that this is not something new. This has happened in various countries in respect to Germany and other countries also earlier on, where victimization of the third gender and the homosexuality was done. Now, when we come here, we realize that he even takes the examples of the Republican government in Republican parties, which basically had tried to pass laws which would basically try to curb sex education or the rights of the homosexuality. She has mentioned that. Along with it, she mentions the topic of sex versus gender debate. Please remember one thing. Sex is a biological term. Sex is a biological term. Gender is a cultural term, socio-cultural term. When we will go ahead, I will tell you the difference also, because majorly it is a biological term. Gender is a cultural term. For example, a person might be born in a man's body with respect to biology, but the person might be perceiving from a cultural aspect that I am not a man, I'm a female. So that is a issue of the gender, not with respect to the sex. Sex is a biological aspect. Gender is something with related to the identity that you perceive you are. That is why gender and sex are two things that one should understand from the biological term and the cultural term. Having read this, you will realize that there are a lot of things mentioned over here, but for us who are preparing for civil services, we need to take out the aspect of transgender and analyze from them from a vulnerable section group. See, every article teaches you something. So this is, though homosexuality, transgender have been mentioned, what we derive from for the civil services is with respect to the transgender. Now understand who transgenders are. Transgenders are those persons with a sense of gender, in whose sense of gender does not match with the gender assigned to them at birth. Gender assigned to them at birth is based on what they see. Let us say someone is having testicles and a penis, would be based on the body, one would say this is a boy. Assigned at birth. That is a sex. Now, let us say the person moves or grows and sees that, let us say, this is not who I am. That is why you realize that various terms, the LGBT community issue also comes in, because they try to basically differentiate between the sex and gender based on their choice. Now, we will be dealing with the LGBT communities also in other articles. Over here, our focus is majorly with respect to the transgender community. Now, this is a definition. Now, we see according to the census 2011, we see 4.87 lakh transgenders are present in India, which is 0.4% of the total population. What is important for us over here is that issues faced by the transgenders in India. First, discrimination due to the sex and gender. You realize that the body might be depicting one sex, but for them, they might not be that. So that is why sex versus gender debate is what is a major concern on which they are basically discriminated. So that is again a psychological or a perception in the society that is there. Second is sexual exploitation. According to the National Human Rights Commission, greater than 15% of the total transgenders who were surveyed said they have faced sexual exploitation in a lot of cases, because this is a figure in which we have seen that data is there, but we will realize in actual many more would be ones who would have faced from some or the other form of sexual exploitation. Now, when we move ahead, we see the legal discrimination. When they have, let us say, been sexually exploited, when they go to, let us say, the courts or let us say the police stations also, they face a lot of challenges. Even the lawyers in many cases are not ready to pick up their cases. And that creates a lot of crisis for them with respect to the legal rights. They are equal citizens of the country as well, but when they face this problem, that is basically comes under the category of the legal discrimination that they are facing. Or earlier on, there were no proper rights given to them unless and until the Act of 2019 which came, which we will discuss after this. Rejection by the society and the family. The National Human Rights Commission says that 99% of the transgenders who were surveyed, they faced the rejection from their families and the society. That is again a major trauma for them that even leads to various mental health issues, even depression and anxiety among them, which is not being studied in depth right now because we see them as a minuscule minority. The problem is that every individual who's present here is an equal contributory to this country. When we move ahead, problems in education. According to the National Human Rights Commission, greater than 60% drop out from the primary school itself. So, they are away from the education itself. So, that means there is difficulty for them to even get the employment. Similarly, we see lack of employment. 92% of the transgenders are denied employment opportunities. This is a major concern. Do you realize all these things being there, you can say that these are the people who have been disenfranchised from the society itself because of the discriminations that they're facing. So these are the problems. So now let's move ahead. Seeing these, what the government did is, government basically passed the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. Now the key features are, it gives a definition, what or who a transgender is. A transgender is a person who is one whose gender does not match with the gender assigned at birth, which we had done in the beginning also. This is the first thing, that at least we have a definition. Second is certificate to identify the transgender person. This basically provides that right to self-perceived identity. Whatever identity a person wants, he can keep that identity or consider himself that he belongs to this particular group. But for that, let us say to get the certificate, one has to go to the district magistrate to get the certificate whether the person is a transgender or not. Secondly, in case of a sex change surgery is taking place, then you need to reapply for the certification to the district magistrate. Now, this is what is given in the Act. Third, prohibition against discrimination against the transgenders has been given. Like, you cannot discriminate against the transgenders based on, let us say, healthcare, education, property, or employment opportunities. Next is benefits related to employment, health, and education. For example, the government is helping them, let us say, in the sex real assignment surgeries or education participation in the healthcare industry. So, government is in a proactive way so that they can help this vulnerable section to come into the mainstream. Next is National Council for Transgender Persons, who will be looking at the various problems, aspects, policies and the acts that should be there for the protection of the transgender community. Next, we have the offences and the penalties which basically this act provides for. Offences will attract imprisonment from 6 months to 2 years and a fine along with it. Now, this is what is the dimensions that we see in this act. But please understand, this act itself has a lot of issues because see, when we see this act, though the definition is given, it's fine. Do you realize that the person has to go to the district magistrate to tell who that person is? That means it does not give a right for self-certification. Again, there is an issue with this. Though it is mentioned that prohibition of discrimination against transgender, we still see 92% of them do not have the employment opportunities. The act is there, but a ground level implementation is not there. We see the offences and penalties that are there. Though 6 months to 2 years is given, do you realize that a lot of exploitation is done to them, where merely 6 months to 2 years is a very less imprisonment for the with respect to the crimes or the victimization or the victims they are to various, let's say, sexual crimes and the day-to-day problems that they face. Again, employment, healthcare and education, we saw greater than 60% dropouts are there. We need to work towards their upliftment overall. Only then we can say that they are a set of people who are ours only. They are not different from us because they are equal citizens of this country, and we need to work for them with a stricter implementation of this act. Along with it, we need to change the mindset of the people also, that they also deserve right to healthcare. They also deserve right to education. They also deserve right to employment. That is what is known as the concept of inclusive development, right? Let's move ahead. Please remember, there are certain MCQs that I'm presenting in front of you. While you're seeing the video, I'm not going to tell you the answers right now. The answers would be available to you in my Telegram account. I'm not mentioning the answers right now. We are starting with this prelims MCQ case also. I would request you to answer them in the comment boxes below in the YouTube video for all the questions that I mentioned. This is with respect to the restatement of values of the judicial values. They might be sounding very similar, but one of them is very precise. So I request you to please write the answers in the comment box. Pause the video. Like, you can pause the video. I'm now out of the screen. You can pause the video, read the question, and then answer in the comment box. This is the first question, right? Second question is with respect to the ENRF, where this topic was taught to you in the class itself. Please read. I'm moving away. Pause. See what the probable answer might be. This is question number 2. Please write the answer in the comment box. Pause the screen, read it, and write it in the comment box. Moving ahead. Now, this is with respect to the Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology. This is question number 3. Pause it, read it, and answer it in your comment box. This is with respect to the countries that are bordering Israel. 4 options are given. Choose the right one. This is question number 4 and write it in your comment box. For the hint, a map is given to you. Avoid using the map. Just do it without it. It will be really a good exercise for you. Next, question number 5 is with respect to Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. We did it in a very comprehensive manner. This is a 5th question. Pause the screen. Write the answer in your comment box. Right? 5 questions are there. You will get the answers in the my Telegram account. This is a Telegram account that is there. You'll get the answers here, but I expect you so that you answer all the questions that are being mentioned. This is what was the news analysis for 14th of September 2024. I hope you liked it, you enjoyed the discussion, and you learned something out of it. We're going to continue with new initiatives to make it more holistic, but we have to be very precise that what is expected from the Union Public Service Commission. So I hope you liked the analysis and you understood the various technicalities associated with it and how to do the newspapers along with it. So take care. Happy weekend to you. Me, Harpreet Singh, signing off from PW OnlyIAS English channel. Meet you tomorrow, or rather day after tomorrow. Jai Hind.